And I see we have somebody else that joined us. That's good. You're making me feel better. When it was just Chris and Lauren, like three of us, I thought, oh no, what do we do with three people? Seven's making me feel good. How about y'all? Seven's a good number. Okay, so as we start today, the title is From the New Deal to a Big Deal. And I don't know why you chose to come to this session, but I'm glad you did. But what we're going to look at is a way to get thinking skills integrated into history and economics. My experience is when you can connect things one to another, that it becomes a stronger bond for retention. So, Deborah, you agree with me on that? Connecting brings up a lot of energy, synergy. If y'all want to take your things off of mute, that's probably good so you don't have to worry if you're on mute or not. I like to hear your voice every once in a while. Okay, Anne, can you hear me okay? I'll ask you the question since Deborah's still on mute. Do you agree that connecting one topic to another gives it strength and synergy?
Definitely, it does.
That's what I'm.
That's how we remember making those connections.
That's what.
That's how we remember best is making those connections.
Yes. So what I like about this is, the New Deal and the Great Depression are things in our history that we think, oh yeah, that happened a long, long time ago, and we don't think about how did it change the world for us today. So, before saying anything else, everything that Chris and I say may or may not be representative of the Federal Reserve System. That's in case Chris says something wrong, or maybe me. The Federal Reserve is going to say, we didn't tell them to say that, but we are required to tell you that. So let's look back at once upon a time, like a fairy tale. Imagine living maybe 100 years ago, or almost 100 years ago. Just think for a minute. We didn't have TVs, didn't have microwaves, sure didn't have iPhones, laptops, didn't have credit cards, or no ATMs. Can you imagine living in that world as compared to today?
I can very easily.
You didn't live. How
Not
can
that
you
long
imagine
ago,
that,
but
Deborah?
hearing my parents talk and being before we
How
didn't have
can you?
TV. Yeah, we didn't have a TV most of the time when I was a kid, so no microwave, all that stuff. Yeah, so I can relate to a
But we
lot of
think
it.
about a lot of things that have changed down through the years. But one of the things that we probably hadn't thought about, I mean, we all know we didn't have laptops 100 years ago. We didn't have a social security number back then either. And we didn't have any unemployment insurance. Now, those things came after the New Deal, as part of the New Deal program. But let me go back and say in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Woodrow Wilson was our president, and the structure, function, and details of the Federal Reserve 12 districts were determined in 1914. And if you look at this quickly, you'll see that they all have, each of these 12 districts have a code 1A, 2B, 3C. St. Louis Fed is 8H. And you can see this is Memphis, and here's Little Rock, and so we're branches of the St. Louis Fed. But the whole district is 8H. And you may already know this, but if you take a $1 bill or a $2 bill, you can see this 8, 8, 8, 8, and the H. This bill was printed for the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and it entered the world of dollars either through St. Louis Fed or the Memphis Fed, but it's printed for the 8th district. Now, this is a good little thing to get your kids interested in because many of the dollars are going to have 12L, 6F, because they started at different Federal Reserves. Now, the reason I bring that up today is because our currency, basically, as it looks today, there's been some minor changes with, security and that kind of thing. But the portraits on all of our bills and the size of the bills was all determined in 1929, right before the Great Depression, or right in the year of the Great Depression. So 1929 was a very busy year. And we at the St. Louis Fed, you remember what our district is? 8H. We specialize in a lot of free resources for teachers. And right here on the bottom of this slide, you can see the website. And Chris is going to show you how to find materials at that website in a little bit. But we specialize in having free resources for teachers. Now, as the world changed during the Great Depression and everything was so different, one of the things that we have done at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis is we have created a whole curriculum on the Great Depression. And if you've ever attended very many of our sessions before, you've probably heard us talk about the Great Depression curriculum. Now, it comes either in the paper version, print version, it's also online. But during we divided it up into 6 lessons, and they all are so um, they're just so interesting to find out what was life really like during the Great Depression. Of course, I bet you can guess here on lesson 5. What do you think that lesson centers around?
Fireside chats.
Sure did. And you know what? The golden age of the radio was in the 1920s. So the radio had just hit the market and people had started having them in their homes right before the Great Depression. So it just was something that happened that affected and had positive results on Roosevelt's plan with his New Deal program. Well, so if we look at this comes straight out of the Great Depression curriculum, I want you to look at the unemployment rate. You don't have to look at numbers, you don't have to look at years. You can just visually see, wow, shot up there big, didn't it? All at once. Look back here, fairly okay. Then look right here. In 1933, it was as high as 25% because people lost their jobs. But the truth of the matter, and keep this image in your mind, how it was a right up out of nowhere, people didn't have a job. Keep this image in your mind. But the truth is, it was probably higher than that because the same instrument to measure unemployment wasn't even invented then. So this is it's an estimate, and it's probably low. But this was disaster. Okay, Jessica, I'm going to stop for a minute. You joined us. Where are you from, Jessica? You're on mute. I don't like this when everybody's muted. Maybe y'all can just unmute. So if we want to do a little question or something, you'll be ready to go. Hey, Tina, you're unmuted. So, what do you see as been a problem with no jobs and unemployment rate being so high?
I have seen parent, parents talking or having to make a lot of difficult choices about what
Yeah.
they provide for their families.
Yes. Okay. So it was. It
So,
was. And anytime there's high unemployment rate, it's misery, problems. Well, when FDR got elected and was inaugurated on March the 4th, 1933, he looked around at the condition of this unemployment across our country and he saw these things: misery, despair, hopelessness, not having enough food, no jobs,
There
soup
was no
lines.
economy.
He saw all of this. Right. There were no, the job market was just, it was just mis- a misery, miserable condition for everyone. And one of the things that I like best about these, looking at these pictures, is can you imagine? Now, Deborah, you said you could imagine not having a TV and a lot of that stuff. I cannot imagine parents not being able to feed their children. And at this time during the Great Depression, there were as many as 250,000 kids riding the rails.
Hmm.
It was illegal, but the parents said, hey, you got to go get a job. We can't feed you anymore. It was illegal. Can you imagine 250,000, mostly teenagers, like 12, 14, 15-year-old kids? Can you imagine them just jumping on a train and going somewhere to find food and clothes and take? Can you imagine that? I cannot. I can agree with Deborah. I can't imagine not having the TV or the microwave or the iPad, but I can't imagine the conditions that parents were facing during this time. There's a guy that he was from Meridian, Mississippi, Jimmy Rogers. If you want to go back and listen to some of his music during the Great Depression era, it'll be things like riding the rails and the trains and all. Well, and then the word hobo comes from the Great Depression time, because all of these people that were out there homeless and looking for a job and looking for food became known as hobos. And that's short for the words homeward bound. So there's so many interesting things about this time that are just exciting to learn about. But when FDR looked at the state of the economy, he said, I pledge there's going to be a new deal for America, because he didn't. I mean, this is something we've got to address. We've got to do something. So he came up with his New Deal program. And I know all of y'all know about the New Deal program. And some of it was to have immediate programs in place, like there were so many of those alphabet soup programs like WPA and uh, all of the many programs that were put into effect. One of my favorites is the one where it was the Agricultural Resettlement Act, where he set up different resettlements across the country. And one of the most famous ones, of course, is Dice Colony, and that's up here in Mississippi County, Arkansas. And they went in, this is part of the New Deal, and this was a temporary solution for homes for people and jobs. They went in and cleared the land. At that time, it was just a swampland, and this was all a government program. And they set up a whole town out of nowhere. They had this big city hall, they had a cannery, they had schools, they had hospitals, they had I mean, it was like they just built a whole town. And then they had applications out there for anybody in the state of Arkansas could apply to move there. Well, y'all know the most famous person that moved there, of course, was who?
Johnny Cash.
Sure was. He moved from Kingston, Arkansas with his family. And one of the things, the criteria for moving to this resettlement area was you had to be destitute. I mean, you couldn't have anything. But then there was like a contract where you agreed you had to be married and your spouse had to be of able body. I don't know what that was, but your spouse had to be of able body so that you could work this land. Well, and here is one of the houses. They had 3 designs there, and this was one of the designs, and that's where Johnny Cash grew up. So we know about things about the Great Depression. So let's look at how does that affect us today? Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many things to talk about, but how does that affect us today? Well, when FDR looked at those pictures of the economy just totally devastated, he said, we cannot ever let this happen again. So he said, we're going to have the Social Security Act of 1935 for old people, those people over 65, because they were hardest hit of all. They had, that their health may have been failing with no way to make a living. So Social Security was designed for people 65 and over for the future. This was not for times of the Great Depression. He was setting it up so it would never happen again in the future. We don't want this for the elderly population. So he set it up and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take out some money out of people's checks when they get paid, and we're going to put it in a special fund. But then the employers are going to match that, so that in today's world, it's the employee pays 7.65% out of their check for Social Security and Medicare, and then your employer has to match it. So for every $100 today, for every $100 you earn, 15.30 $15.30 goes into Social Security. So that was 1935. And he gave the responsibility for collecting the tax, which was called FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act, to the IRS. But when things were desperate, and sometimes when you're desperate, you just have to do things in a hurry. They did things in a hurry. And, setting it up the first year was like, let's just do the best we can with it until we get it organized. But one of the things that we have at our website is a whole curriculum on It's Your Paycheck. And when this is relevant today, because if you get your check today, it's going to have this Social Security withholding, the FICA tax. And when your kids start getting a job and getting a check, they're going to say, why is this taken out of my check? And you can say, well, it goes back a long time ago when the Social Security Act was passed. Okay, so let's see who's listening. If you're on mute and you want to say the answer, please do. Stephanie, I can see you, so I'm going to call on you.
I believe you said the IRS.
I sure did. And Stephanie was listening. Okay. Now, when they started doing that, just think, how are we going to keep track of the earnings? Because there might be a whole bunch of people with the same name across the country. So you couldn't say Mary Smith or John Doe. You had to have some way of keeping accurate records. That's how come they came up with this number, the 9-digit number, which is your Social Security number, to make sure nobody else had one like you. You're the only person. But now I haven't told you this. This is going to be a straight guess. Ashley, you want to guess at this one?
Yeah, give me a second to read it.
You can read that loud. I'll read it for you. The first Social Security numbers were issued. What's your guess? I hadn't told you.
I'm gonna say B. I have no idea. I'm probably wrong.
Let's see. Well, that's okay. I hadn't told you, wouldn't have known. By the U.S. Post Office.
Wow.
Because remember, I said it was put together really, really fast. They did the best they could. And the U.S. Post Office was the first place where Social Security numbers were issued. All right, let's see. Lauren, I'm going to let you take a stab at this one.
Okay.
Now, I did tell you this one.
I'm going to go with C, but it was based off of a law.
Based on the law, Social Security Act. That's B. You said C.
Well,
Did you
I mean,
mean
it's
B?
paid by employees, but only because
But that
it
says,
was put into
but
law
it says,
first.
but it says only paid by employees. Who
Oh,
else
okay.
has to pay?
Paid by employers. Okay. So,
Yeah,
yes,
the employees.
prior to any of
Mm-hmm.
that, the law was enacted first. So,
But the FICA taxes are paid both by the employee
and by the
and
employers.
the employer. Okay, so another thing that's interesting about the Social Security number, and I'll bet you got your Social Security number before the year 2011, so this is going to apply to all of us. Wherever you applied for your Social Security number, the first 3 digits identifies where you applied for it. The first 3 digits of my Social Security number are 429, and that's going to tell you I applied for it in Arkansas. Anybody? Ashley, what about you?
Yeah, I'm 429.
Chris, what about you?
Do you have paper? Um,
Jeanette,
Yes.
you don't have me on there.
how many do you need?
I didn't put you on there.
No,
Okay,
I only
Chris
have
is
a few.
it's
Chris.
468.
Okay, Chris probably applied in Minnesota because that's where he was born and raised. I didn't put Minnesota on there. I
Nope.
I wasn't thinking of you, Chris.
Well, at least you didn't
I'd
put.
redo this whole chart.
Yeah, but at least you didn't put Wisconsin. That would have been offensive to me.
Okay, but isn't that interesting that the first 3 digits, if you applied for it before 2011, tells where you applied for it. Anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff about this 9-digit number that we carry around with us that's important down through the years, and it started with the New Deal. But even today, not one of you in this group doesn't have a Social Security number, and not one of you doesn't have it memorized because you have to use it so much. But it became so. I mean, people just started. You know how passwords are hard to remember, and you've got 45 passwords for everything you do. Well, so people started thinking, well, let's just use Social Security number. So way up here in 1962, things changed. It'd been around since 1935 when the Social Security Act was passed, but it took a few years to change. to file your income tax, you got to have a Social Security number. And then in 1970, banks started saying, I mean, you can't have a bank account without a Social Security number. And the first thing you know, everybody was using it. Look in 1989. In 1989, I was the school principal. And when school started, you had all these forms to fill out and about 500 free lunch applications that had to be approved for the free lunch program. I hated that because these people would send in all this stuff. If they didn't have a Social Security number for them, the parents, and every member of their family, I'd have to send it back and get all those Social Security numbers for them to be eligible for the free lunch at school. I mean, that was a big deal going through all those things. Well, and then look at 1996, started having them on driver's license, death certificate. You couldn't even get a divorce without the world knowing your Social Security number. You couldn't get married. So they were just everywhere. Can anybody guess at why 2004 and these two down here start going the other way? They're not going to be on driver's license anymore, and they don't have to be on everything. Why do you suppose?
Because of the
Why?
technology and the fraudulent, stealing the identity.
Yep.
So
Yes, because of identity theft. And when we said can you imagine not having a microwave or a TV? Can you imagine? Can you, can you imagine how much identity theft has grown over the years? People didn't worry about identity theft 100 years ago. Didn't even, I mean, what are you going to steal? Their name. That's about it. Okay, so another question here. Volunteer. Um, how about Tina? You want to take this one?
Sure. It is required to file federal income taxes.
You are right. You are right. It is required. So we can see that the new market for uh, tech, like paper shredders, like you go to Office Max, they want you to shred all your papers, and then all these people selling identity protection. Amazing how things have changed. And I'm going to let Chris wait in just a minute. He's going to tell you how you can get this, uh, all the information on the Social Security number, either in a print form or online. So, Chris, I'm going to skip this and come back to you in a minute. But you know what? That's not all that happened during the Great Depression. Unemployment insurance started too. Those pictures we looked at a while ago, people in soup lines and desperate and had no money and kids riding the rails. There was no unemployment insurance. And today, in times of COVID, in the past year, the unemployment insurance program has zoomed because it was there. It was a safety net. If you lose your job, you can draw unemployment. So that's another thing, big deal that came out of the New Deal programs, and it is part of the Social Security Act. Now, they started with a couple states, and Chris, Wisconsin was one of them. I hate to tell you, but they tried their own program. Didn't work too well because it was working, but they were losing people over it. Because if Wisconsin is taking money out of your check, making the employers pay based on the amount of your check, these employers would say, well, I'm not going to stay in Wisconsin. I'm going to go over to Michigan or somewhere. Social Security Act made unemployment insurance programs then a state function. And what was determined is every state, the federal government says every state's going to have one, but you're going to get to run it yourself. So like when Wisconsin tried it and they lost business because the businesses would move to other states. If every state had to come up with that plan, then there was no loss. Now, unlike Social Security, the unemployment insurance is paid for 100% by your employer. You don't even have to pay for it. So it is an expense to employers. And this is a copy of an IRS form that employers have to file and pay in based on ever how many people they had working for them and the wages. The basic agreement was set up. If you have a work record and you can satisfy that, you're going to get to draw a check. But it's not equal across all the states how much you draw. Because remember, it's designed by the individual state, even though it's required by the Social Security Act. Am I confusing? Am I saying this in a confusing way? Ann, am I confusing you?
I got it.
Okay, so the big difference is unemployment insurance is paid totally by the employer based on wages, but it's run by the individual state. So, like, if I work in Arkansas and I qualify for unemployment benefits, and let's just pick a number. Let's say I was making $500 a week. I could have that same job in Tennessee, just over the river, and qualify, same income. My benefits from Social Security would be different. Or I could go down to Mississippi, same job, same, if I'm working there, same income, same job, my unemployment benefits would be totally different. So that's kind of, you know, you got to look at, I mean, it's good, but at the same time, I think, wow, I'm gonna pick which state I'm gonna work in based on if you need unemployment insurance. All right, here's the three primary criteria. You got to have worked a minimum number of weeks. That's set by the state. One state may say 10 weeks, one state might say 20 weeks, whatever. This is determined by the state. And when you lose your job, it's got to be through no fault of your own. You can't get fired. If you get fired, you forfeit the unemployment. And then current data. I want you to look, the vision of the unemployment that we saw at the beginning of the Great Depression. Remember how it went just straight up out of nowhere? Look at this. This is July through January. And unemployment's good. And we're like, I don't, what is that, 3% or something like that. Everybody's got a job. Everybody's going along really well. All at once, my goodness, look what happened. This is the national. Shot up overnight, didn't it? What do you suppose triggered that? Ann?
I think it was COVID, the pandemic.
So many jobs, so many
What?
small businesses went basically that closed their doors.
Yes,
Economy busted. It was not.
right here. Right here
Was
is when COVID hit.
yeah.
And look what happened. It's just like the Great Depression almost. I mean the graph, isn't it? Straight up out of nowhere.
Hmm.
All right, look at look at the next one here. I'm kind of stuck. There it is. Look at what happened in Arkansas during that same time. Straight up. I mean, if you had a job, everything's going well all during 2019, and start right here, March 2020, 2020, straight up, COVID hit and changed the world. This is, I pull this for Mississippi. Look what happened. Straight up, same time. So the unemployment data that we want to look at for today's world is very similar to what it was way back in the old days of the Great Depression. The difference is, here's a comparison. Lined, this is Great Depression time. Look how their heads down. They look in despair. There's no hope. They're lined up for soup probably or something. But in today's world, they can go to the mailbox, get that unemployment check. It's probably going to be direct deposited, but they're going to get a check. So that safety net that people have today is only there because of the Social Security Act of 1935.
I actually,
Look at this.
going back to that photo of from the Great Depression, that almost looks like the lines at the unemployment offices around the whole state. I mean, I called the other day and they said come before 6 a.m. because the line starts forming and we don't even get through the line before we close at the end of the day. With that, you can't do very much
Well, you know what?
online. I'm sorry,
Why can you not do very much online?
through
So why
unemployment.
is it limiting how much you can do online?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
because Arkansas, I don't know about other states. Like I've I actually did collect unemployment back during the summer because I have two jobs and I lost one job. Of course, I couldn't get unemployment while school was currently in session. But they Arkansas doesn't do their stuff online. You can apply online, but you have to go in person to basically for them to process your application.
Well, that's surprising. Where are you from?
I live in Little Rock.
That's surprising because a lot of the unemployment offices are closed because of COVID. So I guess it depends on where it is. But yes, people
Yeah,
lined up either on either in person or on trying to get through on the telephone or trying to get a connection online. But the difference here is in the Great Depression they had nothing to rely on, whereas today they've got a check if they apply. Look at this for a minute. This is normal, not in times of COVID, because there can be extensions and there can be changes made that are because of emergency conditions. If you live in Arkansas, normal weekly benefit is $451. No, going down to Louisiana, $247. Massachusetts, 823. Do you see how the different? Look at Washington down here, 844. And I left Minnesota off of this one too. Chris, I'm going to have to do better. But you can see that most states allow you to be eligible for 26 weeks. Florida, only 12. Lose your job in Florida, that's not going to pay very much. But look at this map of last summer after COVID hit. Isn't that interesting that California, so many people were unemployed? And What is this state right here? Who knows what that one is? Y'all can cheat. Look it up. What
New
is this
York.
state?
New York.
Isn't that strange? Okay, test. See who's been paying attention. Tina, I'll let you answer this. Unemployment insurance is generally funded by, what's your answer?
B, a tax on employers.
Yay! Employers. All right, now I'm going to get another test question here for any. Lauren, you still with us?
I am.
You want to take this one?
Let's see, I will.
Which
Oh,
did you
okay.
did you? What'd you say?
Oh, I'm still reading. They have to be able and available to work, but
Well, let's see if you're right. Yes, you cannot draw unemployment insurance if you're sick and in the hospital. And if they offer you a job and you say, I don't want that job, can't draw it. Because if you get offered a job and you don't take it, messes you up. And you don't file for benefits each day, it's weekly. All right, let's see. Deborah?
Yes.
This I have not talked about this. What do you think this is? I didn't mention it.
No, but I almost think it may be true because there's only so much money in the pool. But I don't know. I was wrong.
It's you were wrong. Oh well, that when you're wrong, we're going to get it right. Okay, many people get this confused. The number of people applying for unemployment insurance is not in any way related to when you see that the unemployment rate is 8% or something. It's collected totally different, has nothing to do.
That's
So
good
don't
to know.
confuse those. It is, isn't it? Because you could have unemployment job claims increasing or decreasing big numbers or whatever, but it's not the same as the unemployment rate. A different organization collects that data using different criteria. So just know that. And so I'm going to turn it to Chris, and he's going to show you where to get our resources. Chris, did you get mad and leave?
No, I'm here.
Okay, you're here, but you are mad, right?
No, I'm not mad. All right. So I switched over to share my screen. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we can. We can
Okay,
see
great.
it.
So what I'm going to do, just quickly go through a couple of things to find our resources here. And if you have any questions, feel free to email either Jeanette or myself, and we'll be able to help you. From our main landing page, stlouisfed.org, you'll go to Economic Education, Econ Ed at the St. Louis Fed home. And from that page, you will be able to sort and filter any of our materials by grade level, by language. We have a lot of materials in Spanish, more to come, the subject, the type of resource, or the concept. And so just given what we've spoken about here, what Jeanette shared with us today, I'm going to show you just a couple of things on unemployment. If I can scroll down here a bit. So, oops. You can also filter here in the search box. So I've gotten to unemployment, and this was a, one word pulls up a bunch of different resources, and if you care to learn more about how to calculate unemployment, for example, here's the making sense of the unemployment data, page 1 economics. Jeanette had shared the page 1 economics. I'm going to just show you these quickly. You can access them, the paper or PDF file, through the website like this. And you can also go into our teacher portal, which I'm going to log into right now in the last couple of minutes, and just show you how you can access and assign resources to your students and have them complete our modules. And the assessments contained within go right to you. So I'll show you that here for a second. This is all free. You can sign up for your own account and access all of the resources in the instructor panel or in the teacher portal at no charge. So I'm going to just go in here to the resource gallery and give you a sense of all the resources there. You can search in here. You can filter by the most popular, the newest, things like that. But I'm going to just put in the type of resource as the reading Q&A. Those were the page 1 economics articles that Jeanette shared in this session. So you can assign these. You see all the different topics. We do have a middle school and a high school college version for many of them. They're all behind the portal here, and I'm looking for your unemployment one here, Jeanette. So let's look.
It's way at the end, because
Okay.
it'll be way at the end.
So what you're able to do here, as I mentioned, is you can assign these to students and have them complete the resource, and then they can work on their own, or you can have them work in a classroom if you want, and kind of proctor it if you like. But here's what it looks like. The students would have an article, and contained in it are questions. So the students would read through the article and then answer these questions based on the text. And if they didn't know the answer, they can always go back and forth. And you can assign that to your classes. And once you've done so, all of their assessment data would be in your teacher side of the account, which I'm going to just show you quick here. So I've assigned resources to my students. They can add themselves to your class through Google single sign-on, but then you're able to go in and see how they've done on these resources. And then you can export those files in an Excel, CSV, or printable document. So it would show the points, the score, the date completed, and then if you want, you can print certificates of completion for them. And I know I'm out of time here, but if you have any questions on using the portal, please get a hold of us. We're happy to walk you through that, or even do a PD for your district if you want. We're happy to do that as well. So
And
easy to create a class and add students.
And also to end it here, how does this fit the GT classroom? Well, first of all, we have connected different subject areas across time: history, art. I even threw in a little music. You remember a while ago with Jimmy Rogers? And then we talked about thinking skills. We've talked about researching different things that have come from the Great Depression. So can you see ways this is a possibility for the GT program in your district to do something like this?
Yes, lots of great ideas. Thank you both so much. We appreciate you being here today.
And you could even tie it in better because of COVID times. So we appreciate you, and I put our website in the chat. It says go there to the teacher portal to set up your free account. Chris, you got anything else?
Nope, thank you. Let us know if you have questions.
Thank y'all so much. Just a reminder, there's one last vendor session. So from 2:15 to 2:35, and to fill out those bingo cards, they've only had 20 submissions so far. So you have a great chance of winning something. So be sure at the top of that, it tells you where to email it to. So if everybody wants to check that out, the next and last session will be at 2:35. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.